The transmission was not subtle. It came as a piercing frequency across all global networks, military, civilian, encrypted, analog. Screens across the planet flickered into a unified display of alien script that resolved into translated words. Earth is now a possession of the Zalrek Dominion. Do not resist. Within minutes, every satellite above Earth vanished. Ground control rooms stared in disbelief as telemetry data flatlined and orbital visuals cut to static. Nightfall arrived early as the sky dimmed, artificial stars stripped from it by unseen hands. The Zalrek were not conquerors of desperation or opportunity. They were methodical, clinical, and experienced. Dozens of planetary civilizations had been consumed into their empire without meaningful resistance. They had cataloged humanity's achievements, judged Earth's crude technology and fractured politics, and deemed the species inferior. Their assessment, minimal threat. The decision to invade was less strategy and more routine extermination. Earth was simply the next line item in a galactic spreadsheet. From orbit, Earth's defenses didn't last hours. They didn't exist at all. Missile silos were rendered inert through targeted electromagnetic pulses. Air defense grids collapsed as communications blacked out. In one synchronized pass, Zalrek hunter-killers disabled every major power station across North America, Europe, and East Asia. The world blinked and fell silent. Human leaders scrambled, not to defend, but to comprehend. Governments couldn't coordinate. Military branches received orders from voices that sounded human but weren't. Zalrek AI had hijacked command networks, mimicking leadership. Soldiers waited for orders that never came or followed directives straight into ambushes. Then came the descent. Massive obelisks of black metal pierced the sky and planted themselves across every continent. From their hollowed interiors emerged the Zalrek, towering insectoid bipeds with armored exoskeletons and synthetic neural uplinks. They did not speak. They executed. In cities, they moved street by street, dragging civilians from homes, herding them like livestock. Resistance was met with energy blades that split tanks in half and directed plasma barrages that leveled skyscrapers. Surveillance drones hovered like flies over dying civilizations, transmitting the collapse back to alien observers. Alien officers considered it efficient, calculated, unemotional. The Zalrek High Command, safe aboard their motherships in geostationary orbit, reviewed progress reports with detachment. Their analysts flagged minor human resistance in remote areas, rural communities fighting with outdated firearms and improvised explosives. These anomalies were dismissed, insignificant, backward, worthy only of observation for future extermination techniques. But in the silence that followed, something shifted. The Zalrek couldn't comprehend why isolated pockets of humans did not surrender. Villages that had no hope held out longer than capital cities. Armed only with shotguns, Molotov, and farming tools, humans bled for meaningless towns the Zalrek didn't even want. One platoon was annihilated by a group of miners using explosives designed for rock, not war. Their commanding officer had transmitted a confused final message before his feed cut out. They know they're going to die, and they fight anyway. The Zalrek broadcasted images of defeated cities back to Earth. They showed fallen statues, broken flag, and politicians on their knees, hoping it would demoralize the remaining human cells. But instead of fear, those images spread like wildfire with handwritten words scrawled beneath them. Never again. In South America, a downed transport ship was swarmed by resistance, Cell using nothing but machetes and hunting rifles. The Zalrek on board were butchered. In Siberia, an entire Zalrek unit was lured into an abandoned bunker rigged with petroleum fire traps. Burned alive. In Australia, Aboriginal tribes merged with veterans and hackers to hijack alien drones, turning them into recon scouts. Every failure puzzled the invaders. There was no central command, no hierarchy to disrupt, no logic to their enemy, just rage and adaptation. The Zalrek weren't used to fighting species with imagination. Their prior conquests followed predictable escalation patterns. But humans didn't escalate. They improvised. They didn't seek surrender. They sought vengeance. For every Zalrek patrol that disappeared, the word resist was etched into walls, carved into alien hulls, burned into their communication logs. In orbit, A Zaurek commander ordered a full neural scan of the human species. They needed to understand why Earth resisted where others had not. The results returned an anomaly. Emotional centers in human brains displayed overstimulation, not trauma. Fear was overwritten by something far more dangerous: defiance. The species' neurological structure fed on stress, evolved under threat, and adapted to failure. That which broke other civilizations simply made humans more creative. Meanwhile, a child in a refugee camp rebuilt a stolen alien comms device using scrap wires and a discarded radio. She wasn't a soldier. She wasn't trained. But she connected to an unsecured Zaurek network and began transmitting messages. "We're still here. We're coming." The Zaurek increased aggression. Civilian groups were designated military targets. Entire city blocks were vaporized in retribution. They called it cleansing, but it had the opposite effect. For every massacre, new resistance cells rose. A farmer whose family was incinerated built a suicide drone from his crop duster and flew it into a transport hub, killing 100 invaders. A schoolteacher in Nigeria led a group of students into the jungle and began coordinating nightly raids. In Iceland, a retired engineer reactivated a dormant volcanic monitoring station and used its seismic readings to predict alien landing sites. Alien propaganda, once effective in demoralizing enemies, failed utterly. Their broadcasts became punchlines. Human graffiti artists remixed Zaurek slogans into parody. Memes spread faster than fear. Alien analysts tried to suppress cultural transmission, but human creativity was chaotic and viral. One Zaurek tactician wrote in a confidential report, "Their strength is not in weapons. It is in refusal. They are not logical. They are not sane. They are lethal because they are broken in ways we cannot quantify." The Zaurek High Command decided to crush morale in a single strike. They targeted a global symbol, the city of Jerusalem, historically and spiritually significant. It would be wiped from the earth as a final message. As the energy weapon charged, resistance fighters scrambled to intervene. They had no ships, no missiles, just stolen data and desperation. A human infiltration unit. 4 people from different nations who had never met before the invasion broke into the weapon facility hidden beneath the Swiss Alps. They disabled the targeting systems and redirected the beam into space, not at random, toward the mothership. The aftermath of the failed orbital strike sent ripples of confusion through the Zaurek Dominion's command structure. Protocol dictated immediate escalation, but escalation required understanding, and that was in short supply. Human unpredictability had become a variable no algorithm could anticipate. The Zaurek had the firepower to reduce Earth to ash, but High Command hesitated. They weren't prepared for a war that didn't follow rules. They were explorers turned administrators, not warriors. Their enemies usually surrendered before the second phase. But humans weren't fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting for vengeance. Across every continent, small bands of survivors evolved into hunter packs. Former civilians began studying alien tech, cracking interface codes, and repurposing equipment. In the ruins of New Delhi, a teenager reverse-engineered a Zaurek cloaking field and used it to assassinate 4 patrol squads before disappearing into the slums. On the edge of the Rockies, a retired ranger mapped alien troop movements using instinct honed on tracking wolves. The resistance wasn't a movement. It was a mindset, a biological imperative. Zaurek troopers reported increasing casualties despite no visible formations or conventional resistance tactics. They were being hunted by ghosts in environments they didn't understand. Every rock could hide an explosive. Every human could be a killer. The lines between combatant and civilian blurred until paranoia crept into even elite units. The Zaurek deployed psychological warfare to divide and isolate. They simulated the voices of loved ones, broadcast lies, and weaponized grief. But humans adapted again. They stopped listening to the airwaves. Communication went dark, replaced by hand signals, scrawl codes, and analog radios. They relied on memory, instinct, and trust forged in shared trauma. They became tribes, not soldiers. Meanwhile, deep in a bunker beneath Scandinavia, a coalition of scientists and former engineers discovered the neural architecture behind the Zaurek combat systems. It wasn't just hardware, it was a shared network, a hive linked by quantum entanglement. A weakness. One captured corpse revealed the access protocols buried beneath armor plating. With it, humans developed a virus, not digital but bioneural, a sequence of pulses that overloaded the Zaurek link, turning soldiers into liabilities. The first test was in the jungles of Borneo. A Zaurek squad halted mid-stride, froze, then turned on one another. Confused commands flooded the network until it collapsed in on itself. Alien tacticians tried to isolate the breach, but the virus had already been passed through basic communications. Every distress signal became a Trojan horse. Every transmission spread the infection. Now, the Zaurek couldn't trust their own network. Silence became mandatory. Coordination broke down. Units operated in isolation, losing cohesion. And humans, sensing weakness, struck harder. They used the chaos as a signal, not a victory, but at the beginning. In Africa, tribes at once war with one another formed a united war front. Their tactics blended ancient hunting with stolen technology. They moved like wind, killed like fire, and left no trace. In Canada, indigenous communities, long dismissed by modern states, became the backbone of resistance logistics, mapping terrain, and moving supplies through ancient trails. In the Middle East, war veterans turned caves into factories, crafting weapons from raw materials and discarded alien armor. The human capacity to adapt had surpassed even its own expectations. Medical staff began stitching together bodies with hybrid tech, using Zaurek biofoam and battlefield surgery to return fighters to the front within hours. Dead alien parts became armor, weapons, even power sources. Humans didn't just resist, they consumed their enemy. Zaurek morale began to fracture. High Command initiated conscription among its subjugated species, arming lesser races to fight their battles. It was a mistake. Some fought, most defected. A species known as a Thurn, once the pride of Zaurek conquest, surrendered en masse to humans in Siberia. They carried knowledge, schematics, access codes, and historical weaknesses. They begged for sanctuary. They received it not out of mercy, but calculation. Humans weren't building an army. They were building a revolution. The first major Zaurek base fell in Brazil. Not the bombs or plasma, but the silence. Its gates opened after days of blackout. Inside, human insurgents had turned its systems against itself, locking out its AI and using oxygen deprivation to disable guards. By the time Zaurek reinforcement arrived, the base was a fortress flying Earth's makeshift resistance banner. 3 red lines scrawled across black: blood, fire, shadow. Across the galaxy, other species watched. The Zaurek had always been seen as inevitable, a force of order and domination. But Earth showed something else. That inevitability could bleed. Rebellions ignited on distant worlds. Minor uprisings gained confidence. The myth of Zaurek invincibility was cracking. Still, the cost was immense. Cities were gone. Nations collapsed. Billions displaced. And yet, Earth refused to break. Every loss was turned into fuel. Memorials were carved into enemy ships. The names of the dead became passwords, war cries, sacred code. Children in ruins recited them like prayers. Zaurek Command attempted diplomacy. Not peace, but manipulation. They offered safety in exchange for submission. They broadcast messages of coexistence, framing resistance as terrorism. Some humans wavered. Most did not. The offer was dissected, exposed, and turned into a rallying cry. They fear us. Let them. The virus evolved. Human minds began interfacing with alien systems, not through code, but through intuition. A blind woman in Chile could navigate Zaurek recon satellites through tactile input. A soldier in Korea piloted a stolen gunship by thought, syncing with its neural core through sheer desperation. The war had become something new. Not machines versus machines, but will versus control. The Zaurek relied on precision, order, and superiority. Humans thrived in chaos, in ruins, in uncertainty. One resistance cell captured a minor commander alive. When interrogated, he confessed confusion. We erased your weapons, shattered your armies, crushed your leaders. Why do you fight? The answer was simple. because you came. That became the mantra. Not hope, not survival. Defiance. Then came the first real human offensive. Not sabotage, not ambush, a declaration. A coordinated strike on a Zalrek orbital platform. The operation took months of planning, dozens of decoy attacks, and cost hundreds of lives. But it succeeded. The station fell into the Pacific, breaking the sky with a roar that echoed across oceans. The Zalrek realized Earth wasn't just resisting. It was counterattacking, and the humans weren't alone anymore. On a moonlight transmission from the far edge of the Orion Spur, a voice emerged. Not human, not Zalrek. We have watched. We will answer. Earth was no longer a target. It was becoming a symbol. And symbols don't die. They burn.